On the southern edge of Palawan, where turquoise waters fade into the contested blue of the South China Sea, a new Philippine military outpost is rising from the shoreline, Balabac Island, the newest frontier in Manila's effort to stand firm against Beijing's growing maritime pressure. The base sits quietly for now, but its purpose is anything but subtle: to serve as a forward shield against Chinese coercion in the West Philippine Sea. Yet this raises a defining question for our time. Can Balabac truly deter China's aggression, or will it become just another flag planted on the map? Symbolic, but insufficient. The stakes could not be higher. Balabac is not just another airstrip or coastal installation. It is a message to Beijing, to Washington, and to every Filipino fisherman who casts a net into disputed waters. The base signals a dramatic shift in Philippine strategy, from decades of internal counterinsurgency to a new doctrine focused on external defense, sea denial, and regional deterrence. But deterrence is not built by concrete runways or watchtowers alone. It lives or dies on three pillars: capability, credibility, and alliances. Balabac represents all three, but it will also test all three. Balabac's power begins with its location. The island lies at the southern tip of Palawan, guarding the narrow Balabac Strait, a vital maritime gateway that links the South China Sea to the Sulu Sea and onward to the Celebes Sea. This choke point is more than a line on a map. It is a strategic funnel, a route used not only by commercial vessels, but also by Chinese ships, quietly slipping southward toward Malaysia and Indonesia. From Balabac, the Philippines can monitor, identify, and respond to movements passing through one of the region's most overlooked yet geopolitically crucial sea corridors. What elevates Balabac from useful to game-changing is its proximity to the West Philippine Sea's most contested waters. The island sits just 300 kilometers from Mischief Reef, China's heavily fortified artificial base in the Spratly Islands. From this vantage point, Balabac can project direct operational reach over critical flashpoints, such as Ayungin Shoal, Second Thomas Shoal, where the BRP Sierra Madre stands guard, and Pagasa Island, home to a Philippine civilian community and outpost. In a region where distance equals response time, and response time equals survival, Balabac shortens the gap. Strategically, a fully developed Balabac transforms into a forward operating base, FOB, capable of hosting Philippine and allied air, naval, and intelligence assets. With the right systems in place, radar, drones, long-range sensors, missile batteries, and rapid-launch airfields, Balabac becomes a force multiplier. It enhances maritime domain awareness, allowing the AFP to track incursions in real time. It speeds up rapid deployment, cutting hours or days off response timelines. And it strengthens logistics and resupply operations, ensuring that Philippine forces in the Spratlys are no longer isolated or reactive, but supported and sustained. In short, Balabac is not just a point on the map. It is a platform for presence, deterrence, and reach. If developed to its potential, it becomes the AFP's watchtower, springboard, and shield in the southern frontier of the West Philippine Sea. Balabac is not being built in isolation. It is a joint U.S.-Philippine endeavor under EDCA, the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement that allows American forces to rotate through Philippine bases. Funded in part by U.S. Indo-Pacific Command, Indo-PACOM, Balabac represents a shared investment. Washington gains a forward staging area in the Indo-Pacific, while Manila gains a hardened military outpost designed to counter Chinese presence to the west and safeguard maritime approaches to the south. In a region where infrastructure is strategy, EDCA turns Balabac from a blank stretch of shoreline into strategic real estate. The construction blueprint reveals a base designed not for symbolism, but for serious multi-domain operations. The runway expansion is being built to accommodate a wide range of aircraft, from the AFP's FA-50PH light fighters and C-130 transports to potential future F-16s once modernization funds materialize. Alongside it, radar stations and air defense sites will allow the AFP to detect, identify, and track intruding aircraft or vessels before they approach Philippine positions in the Spratlys. A new port, fuel storage zones, and logistics depots will support sustained naval operations, while maintenance and repair facilities ensure that ships and aircraft can recover and relaunch from the frontier without returning to Luzon or Cebu. Behind these concrete plans lies a clear operational vision. Balabac will serve as the AFP's Southern Command Hub, a forward platform that fuses air, sea, and surveillance capabilities into one coordinated posture. With the island acting as a sensor and response node, the AFP can move from merely observing Chinese movements to actively shaping the maritime environment. The base will also be capable of hosting U.S. rotational forces and advanced surveillance assets, including drones and the U.S. Navy's P-8A Poseidon maritime patrol aircraft. Platforms that can track hostile vessels, submarines, and Coast Guard ships across thousands of kilometers. If successful, Balabac becomes more than a runway and a pier. It became a launch pad for rapid response, a shield for Philippine waters, and a surveillance net spanning the southern corridor of the West Philippine Sea. The message is unmistakable. The Philippines is no longer content to react. It is preparing to see farther, respond faster, and deter harder. Balabac's rise is best understood as part of a much larger transformation. Under President Ferdinand Marcos Jr., the armed forces of the Philippines has begun shifting away from decades of counterinsurgency, a mindset shaped by fighting rebels in jungles and mountains toward conventional deterrence, built to counter external threats. For the first time in a generation, the AFP is investing heavily in maritime surveillance, missile systems, air defense, and allied cooperation, recognizing that the nation's greatest security challenge no longer comes from within, but from the waves beyond Palawan. This modern strategy now rests on three interlocking pillars of deterrence. The first is base modernization, a physical network of hardened installations, from Balabac in the south to Puerto Princesa in Palawan to Subic Bay and Lalo in the north. Together, these bases create a lattice of airstrips, radars, sensors, and logistics hubs that support rapid response and deny enemy freedom of movement. The second pillar is allied presence, empowered by EDCA and expanded joint patrols with the United States, Japan, and partner nations. This brings not only capability, but credibility. Aggression against one Philippine outpost risks response from a network of powerful allies. The third pillar is modern weapons acquisition, including BrahMos supersonic missiles, shore-based anti-ship batteries, advanced radars, drones, and integrated command and control systems. Tools designed not to start a war, but to make any attack prohibitively costly. Within this architecture, Balabac is envisioned as the southern anchor, the counterweight to EDCA sites in northern Luzon facing Taiwan. If the north is a shield against the Taiwan Strait crisis and northern incursions, then Balabac is the watchtower and guard post to the south, focused on the Spratlys, the West Philippine Sea, and the naval corridors that connect them. In this role, Balabac completes the emerging Philippine strategy, a multi-axis deterrent network where bases reinforce one another, allies plug the seams, and Filipino forces gain the mobility and awareness needed to defend every corner of the archipelago. China's actions in the West Philippine Sea follow a clear, deliberate, and accelerating pattern. In recent years, Beijing has intensified its deployment of maritime militia, Coast Guard cutters, and naval escorts across waters claimed by the Philippines. These are not random show-of-force maneuvers. They are part of a systematic strategy. Filipino resupply ships and fishing vessels are now routinely shadowed, blocked, blasted with water cannons, rammed, or fenced out by floating barriers, as seen in Scarborough Shoal. Every encounter is another step toward normalizing China's presence, while eroding the Philippines' access to its own maritime territory. The strategic objective is straightforward: gradual encirclement and exclusion. By clogging Philippine waters with ships, gray zone patrols, and legal narratives, China seeks to deny Manila effective control of its exclusive economic zone, EEZ, without triggering a full-scale military confrontation. This is the essence of Beijing's facts on the sea doctrine. Occupy first, justify later. Through constant presence, administrative declarations, and physical blockades, China aims to make its control appear inevitable, permanent, and over time, accepted. The year 2025 has seen some of the boldest escalations to date. In Scarborough Shoal, China reinstalled floating barriers to seal off access to the lagoon. Near Ayungin Shoal, collisions and aggressive intercepts targeted Philippine resupply missions to BRP Sierra Madre. And in a highly controversial move, Beijing announced a unilateral nature reserve designation over areas well within the Philippine EEZ, an attempt to rebrand illegal control as environmental stewardship. Each move individually tests Manila's tolerance. Together, they form a tightening vice aimed at boxing the Philippines out of its own waters. This is why Balabac matters. China is expanding, not by missiles and invasions, but by momentum, presence, and persistence. To stop a strategy built on constant pressure, the Philippines must build a deterrent built on constant capability. At its core, deterrence is the art of preventing aggression, not by winning a war, but by shaping an adversary's mind. It is the ability to make an enemy think twice, by convincing them that any hostile move will either fail or cost far more than it's worth. In the West Philippine Sea, where every decision is measured in nautical miles and political consequences, Balabac is being built as a deterrent outpost, a base designed to discourage Chinese escalation before it even begins. Deterrence operates in two major dimensions. The first is deterrence by denial, which Balabac directly strengthens. With radar coverage, rapid response aircraft, and a forward naval presence, the island makes it harder for China to succeed in any incursion. Better surveillance means Chinese vessels can no longer move unseen. Faster deployment means harassment can be challenged in real time. Layered defenses from drones to coastal radars to missile batteries in the future significantly raise the operational cost of Chinese coercion. In deterrence logic, if the enemy doubts they can achieve their goal, they hesitate. The second dimension is deterrence by punishment, and this is where Balabac gains power through alliances. By hosting U.S. rotational forces under EDCA, the base becomes a signal post for the Mutual Defense Treaty, MDT. Any hostile act against Philippine units stationed there carries the risk of drawing in U.S. forces, including its naval and air power. This threat of punishment doesn't need to be executed. It simply needs to be believed. Deterrence, after all, is as much about credibility as capability. But this is also where the challenge lies. China specializes in gray zone warfare, a strategy that stays below the threshold of war. By using Coast Guard ships instead of destroyers, militias instead of marines, and water cannons instead of missiles, Beijing exploits the space where retaliation is politically difficult. In such an environment, deterrence becomes psychological, not kinetic. China probes, the Philippines signals. The question is, who wavers first? Balabac, then, is not a magic shield. It is a mind game post, a forward symbol designed to shape Beijing's calculations, to force China to consider consequences before coercion. Whether that psychological edge holds will determine if Balabac becomes a true deterrent or just another outpost staring into the sea. Balabac does not stand alone. Its strength is amplified by the U.S.-Philippines alliance, especially through the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement, EDCA, which allows American forces to operate from Philippine bases for logistics, surveillance, disaster response, and defensive missions. By adding Balabac to the EDCA network, Manila effectively closes the southern flank of the U.S. Indo-Pacific posture, forming a geographic link from Japan to the Philippines to Australia. For Washington, the base becomes a forward node in its wider Indo-Pacific strategy. For Manila, it becomes a shield backed by the world's most powerful military. This alignment fits into a growing regional defense balance. As the U.S. rotates Marines through Darwin, Australia, and deepens cooperation with Japan in the East China Sea, Balabac completes the triangle from the west. Together, these moves form a distributed deterrence architecture, a network of allied locations that complicates China's military calculus. Instead of confronting a single base or a single country, Beijing must now consider a web of interconnected forces that can respond jointly, share intelligence, and operate across domain boundaries. In this framework, Balabac is not just a Philippine outpost, it's a regional puzzle piece that strengthens the entire Indo-Pacific deterrent grid. The base also sends a clear signal to Beijing. Aggression near Balabac no longer risks a purely bilateral clash with the Philippines. It risks triggering U.S. involvement under the Mutual Defense Treaty. That possibility alone is a deterrent. China may be confident against individual states, but it must think far more carefully when its actions could pull in U.S. aircraft, warships, or surveillance assets operating just minutes away. The message is subtle but unmistakable. The cost of escalation will not be cheap, and it will not be isolated.
But Balabac,
for all its promise, is not a silver shield. Its deterrent power will ultimately depend on what the Philippines can actually deploy there. A base without missiles, sensors, and aircraft risks becoming a symbol rather than a stopper. Presence without firepower is deterrence on paper, not in practice. This is the first constraint. Capability must match ambition. Second, China will not sit idle. Beijing has a menu of countermeasures it has used before: militia swarming, water cannon harassment, economic pressure, diplomatic intimidation, and influence operations targeting local leaders. If Balabac tightens the Philippine position, China may simply tighten its own in response, escalating the gray zone competition at sea. Third, more ships, more patrols, and more joint missions mean more danger. The risk of accidental collision, miscalculation, or confrontation will rise. And in a crowded battle space like the West Philippine Sea, a single spark can carry unpredictable consequences. Finally, there are challenges at home. Infrastructure in Balabac is still slow, expensive, and logistically difficult to build, with funding limitations and bureaucratic friction delaying progress. In deterrence, timing matters, and every year of delay gives China another year to deepen its foothold in the Spratlys. Balabac's greatest strengths lie in its location and alliance network. Its position gives the AFP faster reaction time, better maritime awareness, and a forward operating point directly facing China's outposts. Combined with U.S. partnership, it sends a credible deterrence signal, one that forces Beijing to factor in possible complications and consequences. But its weaknesses are structural. Balabac does not yet host long-range strike systems, layered air defenses, or a fleet strong enough to match China's military assets. The power asymmetry remains overwhelming, and Beijing still controls the tempo of escalation. The realistic outcome is this: Balabac will not stop Chinese coercion, but it can slow it down, expose it, and raise its political and operational cost. It transforms the Philippines from a passive observer into an active resistor. Deterrence, in this case, is about buying time, shaping choices, and denying China an easy win. Full deterrence will require a network, not a single node. Balabac must be linked to stronger weapons, tighter alliances, and a national strategy that is sustained, disciplined, and long-term. In the end, Balabac stands as a declaration that the Philippines will no longer surrender the sea by silence or routine. It is a symbol of resolve, a pawn evolving into a fortress on the Indo-Pacific chessboard. But symbols alone do not deter great powers. Credibility, capability, and consistency will decide whether China sees Balabac as a line it should not cross, or just another base it can pressure at will. The true test is just beginning. If Balabac becomes a fully armed, fully integrated piece of a wider defense network, it can shift the balance, not by overpowering China, but by limiting its freedom to coerce. And in a region where small nations are often expected to yield, that alone would be a strategic victory. If you liked the video, do not forget to like, share, and subscribe our channel for deep analysis of contemporary issues.